On a warm spring day in 1933, Father Lourdes Costa looked out his back kitchen window, and as he did so, he had a vision. He believed a vision from God. He was the parish priest at the little Catholic church in Smeltertown, a little settlement just on the outside of El Paso, just south of us. And as the name might imply, Smeltertown was built directly in the shadow of the Asarco copper smelter. Maybe some of you remember it before it was knocked down. You would drive through El Paso and see this gigantic smokestack that just sort of jutted up from the sky. Smeltertown was just in its shadow, and it was a company town, as you can kind of imagine. And Father Lourdes Costa was the parish priest there. And on that spring day, he was looking out his back window at a hill that the window sort of framed and faced. And this hill was called Cerro de los Muleros in Spanish. Anyone know what that means in English? Mule Hill. Doesn't sound like much, but what he saw was a vision of a place of pilgrimage and a place where people would come and they would create a monument at the top with a cross, and people would come and make pilgrimage to the top of that hill to remember Jesus' own journey during the crucifixion. So he shared this vision with his congregation, and they were excited about it. They were in for it. And so they got together. They actually constructed a monument, the first of many monuments that would be on the hill, a tall wooden cross that they carried up to the top of the hill on October 28th, 1933, just a few months after his vision. Father Costa wasn't sure who even owned the hill. He wasn't sure what jurisdiction covered it. Was it in Texas or New Mexico or part of the Mexican state of Chihuahua? Actually, it turns out that hill, the borders of all three states actually intersect at that place. So there are parts of it that belong to all three. But as they walked and they prayed going up the hill, they became convinced that God wanted this to be a site of pilgrimage. So they renamed Mule Hill Mount Cristo Rey, or Mount Christ the King. Soon they had erected the monument, and they met with the local Catholic bishop, A.J. Schuler, and told them of their idea. And he bought in on the idea as well, so much that he arranged for the archdiocese to buy 200 acres of Mount Cristo Rey so that the path that went up to the top of it could be used for pilgrimage. And he also did something else, the bishop. Bishop Schuler got in touch with an old friend of his, Urbici Soler, who was one of the most accomplished sculptors in that era, in the early 1930s. He was a European sculptor, but he happened to be touring Mexico City, and he agreed that when he was done, he would come up to El Paso, and they found a gigantic slab of marble that was, not marble, but limestone that was brought from a quarry in Austin. And Urbici Soler spent every day for the next several months until he was finished, from 4 a.m. until the sun would set, crafting a gigantic statue of Christ with his arms outstretched and his hands facing down in a gesture of blessing. But more importantly, as all of this was happening and as the years unfolded, more and more people from different churches all around El Paso and Mexico and southern New Mexico were coming and coming on pilgrimage, especially on Good Friday, to remember. So Father Costa's vision came true. So much so that each year on Good Friday today, depending on what the weather's like, how hot it is, if it happens to be raining that day, somewhere between 10 and 30,000 people from the region on Good Friday will come and do pilgrimage to the top of Mount Cristo Rey, where they stand and they pray under the statue of Jesus as Jesus offers blessing. I can remember how people would come from miles around. When I lived and worked in Las Cruces, my route to work took me on a frontage road out along the highway. And on Holy Week, I would have to be really careful as I turned out onto the frontage road because there would be people walking and also occasionally people crawling as they made pilgrimage to Mount Cristo Rey. Some trekked barefoot as a sign of devotion. Others walked that stony path carrying their own cross, remembering how Jesus carried the cross. And of course, there are those hardy few that crawl. But I think the most moving thing to behold are the church groups that walk up in pilgrimage up Mount Cristo Rey. They will do the Stations of the Cross, stopping along the way to sing and pray. It's beautiful. It's beautiful to be part of a crowd that is all walking up the mountain together. Today, it's not just Catholics that do it. Protestants and even lowly Methodists will walk up the hill together. And it's moving to see the different groups from different churches, singing songs from different traditions, speaking different languages, coming from 2 different countries. They nudge each other when they get tired. The younger people carry water for the older ones. And not only that, but everyone comes along. There are those who are carried up who are from the disabled community. There are those who are guided up by people who will hold their hand because they're visually impaired and they can't see the trail ahead of them. It's a beautiful thing to behold. I've walked up Mount Cristo Rey twice on Good Friday with the 2 churches that I served, one in my internship and the other one as the pastor. And if you've never been on any kind of pilgrimage or any kind of prayer walk, let me challenge you to do it sometime. In fact, here at St. John's, we have a ministry that once a month, the Mountain Cathedrals ministry will walk to the top of a mountain or along a beautiful trail or some beautiful place. And it's not just a hiking club, although they are hikers. It is also a way of, when they get to their destination, they share communion together. It's a spiritual practice. Go on pilgrimage. If you're older and you're not up for hiking to the top of the Sandias, go on a short walk and make it into a prayer walk. There are ways to do that. Because when you go on a walk like this, we always prayed as we went, and going up Cristo Rey, we would stop and do the Stations of the Cross along the way, and you look around at the people walking up the hill with you, and their faces, their expectation, those who were barefoot, those who are singing. And you start to get this sense that your little group is part of a much larger whole of people who want to worship Christ and follow Christ, not just on special pilgrimage days, but any day. And you also get a sense where you start to think every once in a while of everyone who's walked that trail before you. The trail up to Mount Cristo Rey, they just celebrated their 80th pilgrimage. You start to realize that the Christian walk itself is something that others have walked along the way as well. That you're not the first and you won't be the last. You start to get the sense of what Hebrews says, that we are all provoking one another and spurring one another on to good deeds. That's what a pilgrimage is. It's a faithful walk. Pilgrimage is using your feet and a path and a destination to pray. And whenever I've walked up Cristo Rey or done pilgrimage and I look around at what's happening, I can always remember thinking, I wish church was like this every day. And when we are at our best, I hope church is like a pilgrimage, where we're walking together and we carry the people that can't make the way themselves, and we guide the people who can't see the way, and we encourage one another through prayer and through song. Boundaries fall and people see that they're not as different as they thought they were. And most of all, that we encounter the divine along the way as well. That through going on a faithful walk together, we're approaching with true hearts the assurance of faith, to use Hebrews' observation. Pilgrimage, by the way, goes way back. There are psalms written in the time of David and psalms that are called psalms of pilgrimage or psalms of ascent, because as you would walk up toward Jerusalem as pilgrims, you would sing these psalms together. Judy just read a psalm of ascent, one of the more well-known ones. My favorite one is Psalm 122, which starts out with a group of people that are excited to go on pilgrimage together. It says, "I rejoiced with those who said to me, 'Let us go to the house of the Lord.' And now our feet are standing in the gates of Jerusalem." praying as they go. My favorite experience of pilgrimage actually happened away from Mount Cristo Rey. About 5 years previous to that, I was selected with a little group of seminary students who got to go to a community in northern England called the Northumbria community, just south of Scotland. And there were 4 of us who were staying there for the week, and there's this island near Northumbria community called Lindisfarne Island. They call it the Holy Island, and I wish I had time to tell you the story of why. But we walked on the path to Lindisfarne Island, a path that Christian pilgrims have been walking since the 7th century. And what's really cool about it is Lindisfarne is an island just off the coast in the North Sea, but there's a tidal basin, and so when the tide is out, you can walk across dry lands to the island itself, and then when the tide comes in, the ocean comes back and surrounds it until low tide again. And so we set out for Lindisfarne. There were 4 of us walking that day. There was a woman who was Dutch Reformed from Amsterdam. There was myself, a seminary student from Texas. There was an Irish Catholic layperson and an Episcopal priest from South Carolina. It sounds like the beginning of a joke, I know, but we noticed something as we set out, that for a good part of the walk, the Episcopal priest from South Carolina, he was just booking it. I mean, he's out in front of us, and this guy, he was not a young man. He was, I would say, probably pushing 60, and I was 28 or 29 at the time. And there was no possible way I was letting some 60-year-old beat me on the path. So I sped up to keep up with him. And we went like this all day. I ran out of water early. I was sweating a lot. And we would go up these hills where I would just be sucking air, and he was just trotting along on his own pilgrimage, walking to the island. And finally we got there, and I just had to sit there and catch my breath for the walk home. And so a few nights later, it was our last night in Northumbria, and I had to lean over to this Episcopal priest and tell him, like, okay, this was a great week with you, but you just got to know, like, first of all, props to you for being in shape like that. And second, I struggled that walk just to keep up with you. And he just laughed, and he looked at me and said, you know, that's so weird, because I wasn't going to let a young guy show me up. That's why I was walking fast. He said, I thought I was going to die on that trail, but I'd rather do that than let some guy in his 20s show me up. So we kind of figured out we both would have had a better walk if we just hadn't been such men doing that. Now, I don't know that is the kind of spurring one another on that Hebrews is talking about, but I think on some level we all want church to be a place where we're all nudging each other up the hill all the more, place of encouragement. And I think we also want church to be a place where at times, at important times, we feel challenged. You ever come here and hear something from me and you didn't like what I said? Join the club, first of all. But more than that, that's actually the purpose of church, is to convict you a little bit. Make you uncomfortable, stretch you. That's spiritual training. I think when church is getting things right, we are challenging people to walk faster up the hill, encouraging one another to be more selfless when everything else around us is telling us to be more selfish. More open-hearted to feel the needs and the wounds that exist in the world. We are provoking one another to grow in love and good deeds. When we meet together, we are here to encourage one another in that, to say, keep going. Wesley believed this too, by the way. John Wesley wrote my favorite treatise of his, the Character of a Methodist, in 1742. And he's writing to say, what makes a Methodist so methodical? What sets us apart? If you think it's what we believe about this or that issue or this or that piece of theology, then you have missed the point, he says. Wesley said, if you're going to be a Methodist, it's a person who is Christian in more than name only. but in heart and life. They are inwardly and outwardly conformed to the will of God as it is revealed in the written word. A Methodist soul is renewed after the image of God in righteousness and in all holiness. And this is my favorite part. He says, and having the mind that was in Christ, they so walk as Christ also walked. And that's our call, people. That's our walk. That's our pilgrimage. At St. John's, we have a mission statement that we are called to love God, love people, and to change lives. Last weekend, we decided to take the next step and say, well, what does that really look like? Because that sounds very open-ended to me. I mean, any church would probably claim those three things. And so for us, what does that look like? And thanks to so many of you who made time on a Saturday, on the eve of the holidays, no less, so many of you helped us to articulate 5 missional goals for how that looks for us to love God, love people, and to change lives. That's our pilgrimage. That's what we're walking together and supporting one another of. So I want you to think about these 5 goals. I'm going to talk about them for just like the last part of the sermon today. And if you have a piece of paper or you have the back of your bulletin, I'm going to ask you to think about and maybe even write a few words about a response. And if you don't, just know there's like all kinds of pieces of paper in the backs of your pews. You can use any of them. Maybe not the Bible, but any of the other ones. Because I want you to take stock of this. So first we said we will cultivate a Christian community that creates a welcoming, loving, and safe place where all people can belong. Which tells me that we want to be an inclusive community, not defined by who we set apart and keep out, but by the nature of our community being a place where all are welcomed in. So who is someone, and especially, this may be especially true if you've gone here a while, but even if you're new, who is someone at St. John's that you look forward to seeing every Sunday, or who is instrumental in welcoming you to this place? Who was the first person when you felt like an outsider, brought you in, said, oh man, you need to come to my Sunday school class. You need to come to choir. Choir's so great. Write down who that person was for you. And as you do, ask yourself, how could you be that person for someone else? Maybe it was someone who's gone, who hasn't moved away, or who went on to be part of the communion of the saints, who died. But my guess is that there were people that helped incorporate you into this place, included you in the community. And since we're on pilgrimage today, and pilgrimage is a walk of prayer, take a moment now to give thanks to God for that person and ask God to help you be a warm-hearted, open-hearted person who could do the same thing for someone else. Second, we said we will pursue spiritual discernment and formation by following Christ's example. Formation, folks. I think we all want church to be a place that forms us, that we would be different for our time here. That when we come, we're training to be different people. We're exercising a discipline to be different people. So my second question for your thoughts and reflection is, how are you different for having been in this place? What is something you learned here about yourself, about God? Take a moment to pray for that kind of formation to continue in your life and in other people's lives. Third, we said we will serve the needs of a diverse and multi-general congregation through opportunities for all ages and life stages. So what do you want the next generation to learn here? What do you want people who are older to find here? Those people who are in the middle, who are mid-career, and that's a stressful time, and they're thinking about where they go from here and what does retirement even look like. All of you people collecting Social Security, pat yourselves on the back because we may not get it. We just finished another election where it became apparent that older and younger generations don't all see things the same way. And maybe one thing church can do is help us to understand one another, where we're coming from, our hurts and our hopes. So pray for the next generation, and for those who are in midlife, and for those who are older, especially those who have carried the torch of the church that brought us here to this point today, and give gratitude for that. Fourth, we said we will be the hands and feet of Jesus by serving with and for the vulnerable and the at-risk. We all know there's need out there. There's need in here too, but we don't come to this place just for ourselves. This isn't a club and you have membership perks. We want to be a community that looks out beyond ourselves. And so let me ask, how are you going to serve? How are we going to serve as well? So pray for your own need and those around you, but pray for the needs of those who are vulnerable. Fifth, and finally, we say we will bring the future into focus by expanding what is working to what is possible. This community that you see around you, what does it look like in the future? Many of you know, because I talk about it often enough, that I grew up in this church. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I was a different person because my parents made me come to church here when I was in the 8th grade. As I've told you before, they were afraid I was getting weird, and so they said, we're going to get him in church. Maybe that'll help. But, I was nervous when I was appointed here. I was nervous I was going to have to spend the first year saying, yeah, I'm Josh, the kid from youth group, but also I'm not Josh, the kid from youth group. And yes, you're St. John's, the church I remember that saved me when I was in the back in the 90s, but you also aren't the church that you weren't in the 90s. Isn't that a great thing? We don't want this place to be static. We want it to be different than it was in the past. We want it to be, you have grown. You have changed. 30 years from now, the only way we will have failed is if this place just looks the same. We're a different church every day. Thanks to grace. And that is my final prayer, is that in the generations to come, we'll always be a church that grows and changes. But that's one where I don't want you writing the prayer down on the back of your bulletin, because actually you have a way of praying that prayer by filling out this card I mentioned during the offertory moment. Okay? And yeah, I meant that as a joke, but I also meant it very seriously. Because, yeah, this is about making budget and projecting what we'll be able to do in the year ahead, but it's also a way of saying, I want this church to continue to grow. I want this church to continue to reach out. I'm optimistic about the future of St. John's United Methodist Church, which I am. So next week, we'll bring our cards, and we'll have a big, beautiful bucket there for you to drop them into. But use this as an act of prayer that we're going to go on pilgrimage together in 2025 and 26 and beyond. We've got to love this place because it's given us a lot, and it's shown us God's blessings. And as Henry David Thoreau said, an early morning walk is a blessing for the rest of the day. And if that's true, then I think we're on our early morning walk right now. But there are years to come at St. John's where what we do now could lead to a real blessing of a day. So let's walk forward together. And thank you for walking with me so far. And thank you for being such good pilgrimage friends. And don't you dare try to walk too fast, or I will keep up with you, okay? Well, let's pray. Oh, Lord God, I'm so thankful for these people. I'm thankful that we're on this walk together, and we're all pilgrims. And the walk will change us. And it does. And it has. So we just pray that you would keep us all faithful to that shared mission, that you would help us to bear the burden together, and that we would just sing joyfully as we have today, every day, walking forward together in faith. Amen.